Bonnie, welcome to Fast to Heal Stories. We are so excited to have you here. These are always some of my favorite interviews with the success stories, and yours is very profound and it happened pretty quickly, as we will get into. And you are one of those who just connected with me on Instagram and was just kind of working in the background and brought it to my attention. And I'm so happy that you did. So we are going to love to hear all about your story. But just tell us, start out by telling us a little bit about you and how you found me and how you started working with the strategies that I have taught you.
Okay, great. Well, I'm so excited to be here, Shana. I'm just so impressed with you. And so, I just feel honored that you've taken the time to even talk to me. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And, you said so fast. Well, it was fast this sort of last go around with a lot of the strategies that I learned from you. But I feel like it's like when people say, a singer or a band is overnight success. It wasn't an overnight success. I've been struggling with this, pretty much my whole life. And there are times that I've done better and felt like I had a handle on things, but it always reverses for whatever reason. So this time around, I was not a podcast listener. My fiance, I have a fiance, which I feel funny saying at my age, but I do. And he's a big podcast listener and has always told me, do this when you walk. You'll love it. You'll just walk and you won't even realize how far you're going. But I used to talk to my mother every day when I walked, and she passed away in 2020, right before COVID. So I, have to walk in the early mornings in Texas because it is over 100 degrees there by, noon right now. And so I get up very early. It's too early to talk on the phone. So I started looking for podcasts. I had a friend who tried intermittent fasting, and I didn't really buy it at first. I just did not buy it. I'm the type of person that needed to eat breakfast as soon as my feet hit the floor my entire life. And tried it a little and just, it wasn't, I just didn't think I could do it. But I was on the phone with her one day and I hadn't seen her because it was COVID. And she'd been telling me how great intermittent fasting was and how great she was doing. And I didn't really, believe her 100% because I hadn't seen her in months. And her cleaning lady came over to pick up her check. And when she opened the door, she said, "Hold on, I've got to open the door and pay my cleaning lady." When the woman opened the door, my friend Jan said hello to her, and her cleaning lady said, "Oh my God, what have you done? You've lost so much weight. You're so skinny." And Jan was like, "Oh, well, thank you." So then I was like, okay, I've got to check this out. So I started looking into it, but when I was looking for the podcast, I just went on, did not know who you were, but you were on Apple Podcasts, and looked up intermittent fasting, and yours was one of the first podcasts that I chose. And that was, probably March or April of this year. And I've been listening multiple times a week and just trying to absorb all of the information. And I still can't articulate everything, to when I'm trying to tell someone about it. So I still have to refer to, what I can see on your website and writing in other places too. But I've been, living it, some pretty consistent strategies, probably 4 or 5 pretty consistently since then. And, 45 pounds later, I'm convinced.
That's amazing. It's been like 4 months then, maybe
Yeah.
5. I mean,
5. It's probably been 5 now that we're into September.
well, I'm so glad you found my podcast because I don't know. It's like I don't know if people search if I pop up or whatever it is. So I'm glad that you found Fast to Heal
Yeah.
Stories and that it has changed your life. That's just really encouraging. So give us a little bit of background about like what you tried before, why you were apprehensive about intermittent fasting and how it's been different for you.
So before, I think I tried the many, many things that I think all of us have tried over and over again. But definitely the low fat, no fat, um, you know, phenomena that was going on many years ago, particularly in college, just cutting out all that together. I think it was you that said, I was eating pretzels and, Twizzlers and thinking, oh, I'm doing such a great thing because it's no fat. I was trying to eat the leanest meats, if meat at all. So I did that for a while. I also did vegetarian. I did vegan. I did a lot of different of those things. Again, my fiance is a meat eater. He's more of a keto Atkins guy. And I would make our meals with lots of vegetables, and I would just add the meat at the end for him, and I would eat just vegetables. And it just didn't connect that really wasn't the way. And I was also counting calories and eating all day long, up to right before bed, and thought and I could do it, and I was losing some weight, but it wasn't sustainable, and I still had cravings for sugar and cravings for other things. So the intermittent fasting for me was initially a way just to gain control and not really worry about it as much. But then I think the physiological or medical reasons behind it are what are making more sense to me now, and just not triggering things throughout the day every time you eat, and trying to limit your window and trying to limit the number of times that you eat.
Yeah.
So when I first started out, I really the only goal was to not eat before 11 and not eat after 7. And I just let myself eat whatever I wanted for a month. And I still lost weight, a lot of weight, about 10 pounds. But then I said, now tighten it up. I love healthy food anyway. So just adding more healthy food, taking out less healthy food, and other things like Diet Coke and actually alcohol. I've pretty much eliminated alcohol 100%. So those things, and then just getting more activity and committing to not sitting in front of the computer all day and night and being a workaholic. It's just a bunch of little changes on all sides.
Yeah. And that's important to remember, because a lot of times people they come to the podcast, or they come to this lifestyle, or they read my book or whatever it is, or they read another book and they think they got to change every single thing right away. And it's just overwhelming. And who wants to fast and who wants to skip meals? Because it's really a lot more fun to eat
Yes,
and
it
eat
is.
all the time. Especially when you have high insulin, and most people do have elevated levels of insulin or some level of insulin resistance. And then fasting's hard. Like, the last thing you want to do is skip meals when you have high insulin levels, because you're craving and you're not feeling good. So I love how you went about it, and you just said, I'm just going to put some parameters on when I'm eating. And I think that's such a great first step, because it just tells you in your mind, like, okay, I'm done at this time, but I can eat at this time. And it's not so restrictive. And that, at least having those parameters in place and those boundaries in place, will help you to bring your insulin levels down, at least at those times, even if your nutrition's not perfect. You can just slowly work your way in, which is what you did. But as those insulin levels come down and those correction centers start to take hold, you don't care about eating all the time. But you're right. I was that person who, Diet Coke, pretzels, and Twizzlers. I'm not eating any fat, it doesn't matter. I'm skyrocketing my blood sugar and eating food dye and all kinds of sugar and ultra processed foods and chemicals. It's like, oh, there's no fat in it. That was me. And that was when I was a dietitian. It's like,
I know, that's what's incredible.
that part of it. It's like, I was just thought, oh, good, because that's what we
That's
had.
what you were taught, right?
That's what we were been told. I just think, oh, no wonder I developed insulin resistance. And I wasn't helping anybody. So yeah, you had some stress, like we all did. You had the COVID stress, but then you had your mother pass too. So was that tell us about, like, leading up to this. Were you in were you still battling to lose weight, or, what kind of state were you in at that point? And, um, what was different, like leading up to it? Was there anything that, the stress is just one of those things that it just exacerbates the issue. Like, were you kind of in like your worst health ever, or would you
Yes,
say? Okay.
yes.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Tell us about if
maybe,
you're comfortable with sharing the health.
sure, yeah. Maybe, you say you reach sort of your rock bottom, or for me, it was my all-time highest weight and blood issue, blood test issues, because I've never really had any issues with cholesterol or anything. And all of my family, not all, but many of my family members struggle with their health in the respect that they're all taking a lot of pharmaceuticals. And my mother 10, 12, 13 pills a day. And she had type 2 diabetes, so I knew I was predisposed for that. But when she was dying, and after she died, and she didn't die of COVID, and she was 80, but it was unexpected, the quickness with which she died. And it was challenging because I couldn't see her because it was COVID. And until she was terminal, I couldn't see her, and I could only go in once a day for an hour once she was terminal. So it was very traumatic. So I think I definitely had PTSD afterwards, and just chose to cope by not coping. And the only thing that I really had, other than my daughters and my family, was my job, and so I just threw myself into my job. I actually changed jobs during COVID to a more stressful, higher, responsibility job, which was a mistake. And, just had all this pressure on me to perform. And, I was doing well and making more money than I'd ever made, but I was really just driving myself into the ground and not taking care of myself emotionally, spiritually, or physically at all, just letting everything happen around me. So I had a wake up call. I had an issue with my heart rate going too high. I had to go to the emergency room last September, and I had a physical, and my cholesterol was, not horribly high, but from what the doctors say, to me, it was horribly high. Was probably 270. And my liver enzymes were up quite a bit. So I was in a panic. I researched it all. I Googled it all. My doctor sent me a note through, the text app, to tell me, go on a low fat diet and get 30 minutes of exercise a day, and come back in, at some point so that we can see where you stand. Well, I went into, panic mode, which was probably a good thing for me because I do tend to operate well in extremes. And I went back in to see him 3 months later, and I'd lost all this weight, and my, numbers had come way down. And he said to me, "How did you do that?" I said, "Oh, really? You want to know my secret?" Because I really think maybe you should have told me how to do it.
Right.
And as you pointed out, God bless them. And at least I'm going in for blood tests so I can kind of see where I stand regularly. But that's just what the medical community has been taught. That's what our doctors have been taught. And I just refused to go on even cholesterol medicine, so I said, I will do this because I'm not going to go down that road. I think the amount of medicine that I see the people in my life taking deteriorates their entire body. It may keep their blood work looking okay, and it may help them if they're not willing to change their lifestyle, but I would just refuse. So all of that culminated in April with me just turning right, and just saying, I'm going to do this, this, and this. I started a spreadsheet that said, these are the minimum things I'm going to do every day, and got in the routine of walking every day, even if it was only a mile or two, drinking water only, doing the intermittent fasting. So those were the 3 things I started with. And then I've just gradually added more things. And yesterday I, lifted weights for the first time in several years. So.
Awesome. So yeah, you just got to start layering things and conquering one thing at a time. And pretty soon you're doing 10 things that you weren't doing 3, 4 months prior.
Mhm.
And it's not a big deal. So yeah, that was interesting. So you did have elevated liver enzymes. Sometimes people have fatty liver and they don't even have that to go off of. Fatty liver is more challenging to diagnose because other than elevated liver enzymes and elevated triglycerides, you don't always know unless you have a scan. And you've listened to the podcast, you probably know my mom has had fatty liver for probably decades. And I went to a liver specialist with her to address her fatty liver, which had advanced to cirrhosis. They never asked about her diet one time. They just said, oh, we can give you this blood pressure medication to help with some like varices that she was dealing with. I'm like, oh, we got to get out of here. And this was a big hospital institution. So they had no idea. And these were liver specialists. And so you were told to go on a low fat diet. And that's what most people think. It makes sense because it's called fatty liver. You would think, oh, fat causes
Mhm.
this.
Mhm.
But it's not the natural fats, it's the sugar, it's the carbohydrates, it's eating too often. It's just your body not being able to put anything anywhere because it's packed full of energy
Right.
already. So then the liver's just so busy converting all of that extra energy to fat. And so you were able to turn that around. And that's such an important message. Most of these, well, chronic diseases that are due to lifestyle are fixed with lifestyle. They're not fixed with 10 medications. And it's like, yeah, we've extended life, but who wants to live to be 90 and taking 10, 15, 20 medications and, laying on a couch all day? It's just,
Right.
you want to have like, be thriving in your life. So yeah, the low fat exercising half an hour probably is not going to cut it, but hopefully you told them everything that you were doing and you got that.
Somewhat, I think you know how it is. I don't tell anybody anything unless they say, "How did you do it?" And then I tell them a little bit, but the earmuffs go on really quick. you know?
People don't want they want to hear that you did, something magical. You took some supplement, something that doesn't have,
Mhm.
having to actually change your life
Right.
and modify things that you don't want to modify. And it is fasting can be intimidating for sure, especially if you don't know the science behind it.
Right.
That's the big reason why I do this podcast is just to get the word out and bring people on that never thought that they could fast. And it's not even all about the fasting, it's just about bringing inflammation down and healing the body. I'm sure people are wondering what you do for a fasting routine. I know you said you started with you know being done at 7 p.m. and not eating again till 11 a.m. Is that pretty much your routine now, or has that changed over time?
It's pretty much my routine. I Some days I just naturally shrink my eating window because I get busy in the mornings and I'm thinking, I'm going to eat at 11 and then I, get in a meeting or, on my computer or I'm talking to people on the phone and I realize it's noon or 1. And I'm okay with that. I'm not starving but I'm ready to eat when it's time to eat. It works best for me because of my relationship and my family to stop at 7 and not earlier. Because I make us dinner every night and we eat by 6:30, and if they're not ready to eat, I eat. And so every my big thing now is I just say, oh, I don't eat after 7, I don't eat after 7, I don't eat after 7, and people respect it. I have family members over, let's order a pizza and watch a movie, and I just say, no, I don't eat after 7, but you go ahead, if you want to, and I'm not hungry anyway. So people get used to it. And I'm a very early morning person when I'm at my best. So I would probably prefer to eat earlier and stop earlier. But just for, the people in my life and my social situation and everything, it works better for me to just use 7 o'clock as my drop dead time. But I am going to play around with some other things when I'm on my own. I travel a lot, and my fiance lives in the Washington D.C. area, but I have a home in Texas, and my family's in Texas. So when I'm there, sometimes I have a little bit more individual control over my schedule. So I might play around with starting earlier and finishing earlier on some days. And that's kind of a question for you: is does it matter if you change your eating window a few times a month, or is it better to stick to something specific all the time?
I always encourage people to change things up just because your body, like your enzyme production and your digestion and all these juices, if you're eating at the exact same time every single day, your body just becomes accustomed to that. So if you can change things up, even like you said, a couple times a month, and maybe you eat at 9 a.m. or 8 or 9 a.m. and you don't eat after 3, like just those little nuances for the body, it forces it to adapt and makes it stronger. And I know for a lot of people, we've talked about this on the podcast more recently, a lot of people like to fast through breakfast and, eat their lunch because socially it just works better to eat lunch and then dinner. Like you said, like you want to eat with your family. But a lot of my students who are struggling or have cortisol issues or, are really early morning people, like I am as well. Like I'm usually up before 6, somewhere between 5 and 6 is my usual. Like I've been up for 5, 6, 7 hours by the
Right.
time it's noon, whereas
Yeah.
some people aren't up until 8 or 9. So that does make a big difference. It's like you've been
Mhm.
fasting a lot longer than somebody who sleeps in later, and maybe they don't go to bed till midnight, where I'm in bed by like 9:30.
Right.
Usually asleep. So that's the beauty of the intermittent fasting. It's just so flexible. And
That's good.
yeah, it's like you have a late dinner here and there, not a big deal. It's like I do not like eating late at night. I just don't like to go to bed, but it's like sometimes it's inevitable and that's
Right.
okay.
You're gonna have, dinner with your girlfriends on Friday. You don't want to be the one that says, "I'm not eating,"
Right.
And if you can
Right.
just adjust it that day by starting later, you know, then I
Exactly.
think that's a good thing. I didn't, realize that it was that flexible. So I'm not perfect by any means, but I, was trying to adhere to that. The one thing I haven't started yet is, a 24-hour fast,
Mhm.
which I do want to, try here in the very near term.
Yeah.
So any guidelines around, what you think is best for the first times that somebody tries that to be successful?
Yeah, I know for me, like I used to do when I was reversing my insulin resistance. So it's kind of just looking at where you're at, what are your goals, and what are you trying to achieve? Because sometimes people, completely turn their health around, get to, a healthy weight and energy level where they're really happy and they've never done a 24-hour fast. And then there's other people who just have really stubborn insulin resistance where those 24-hour fasts a couple times a week can really be helpful. So it really, I think, just depends on the individual person. But I used to do one like once a week when I had insulin resistance. And I started out, I was kind of like you, like, I'm like, okay, I can't eat until at least noon. You have all of these boundaries and rules in your head. And I would go like dinner to dinner. And that was hard for me. Like it was really hard for me to wait until the evening because I work out in the morning typically. I'm really busy, like even mentally, I'm checked out by dinner time. Or some people like get that second. I just don't understand like how people can at night. Like it just is just
Yeah,
not.
I'm the same way.
So I figured out that fasting lunch to lunch when I did do 24-hour fast was so much easier. So I would eat at like 11 or 12 or maybe even 1 if I was eating a little bit later and then do my 24-hour fast. And it was not a big deal because I
Mhm.
just made sure I was getting enough protein and fat at that first meal. And I did it when I wasn't, not the week before I was having a period or anything
Yeah.
like that. And it really wasn't a big deal, but it took some time. I probably didn't do a 24-hour fast until about 6 months in, just to establish the insulin sensitivity. And, like we were talking before, I think it's really important to have some boundaries at the beginning because your hormones are so whacked. I mean, if you had fatty liver, I mean, those are some pretty severe metabolic issues that are going on. And it's hard to listen to your body. It's hard to say, I'm hungry or I'm full because your hormones are so off that you can't trust your own hunger. And that's, this is a whole nother topic. And I've done podcasts on this, but the whole like eating in moderation and all of it's like, well, trust your hunger. It's like you can't
Yeah.
when your hormones are so off. So
When your hormones are off, when you're drinking diet sodas and,
yeah.
artificial sweeteners, when you're having any alcohol, in my opinion, it's really hard to gauge how you really feel. And it's harder to stick to a plan because you do have those cravings that come from out of nowhere. And it's just so much better. And another thing that I've worked into my routine from you is the 50 grams of protein per meal if you're going to eat 2 meals, and at least 100 per day. So the 100 grams of protein, less than 100 carbohydrates is what I really think about, and don't count calories anymore. And I'm so full and satisfied from a meal when I include that amount of protein. And then I eat a lot of greens. I love vegetables, so I eat a lot of greens. And then it's really not that difficult to. Sometimes when 6 o'clock comes around, I'm like, I've got to eat. I can't not
Right.
eat dinner. That's probably not good. But I'm just like, I don't even know if I'm interested.
Yeah,
But
those days come because those are a little more rare. It's always like the week of my period and the week after. Like those are the times where I'm like, I don't care if I eat dinner or not. Those are the greatest times to do a 24-hour
wow.
fast though, and you just don't eat at dinner. And last night or 2 nights ago was one of those where I was like, why did I eat dinner? I wasn't even hungry. I just felt like I should
You
because I
should,
was
because it's going to
my
be so long before you eat
yeah.
again.
Yeah.
Right.
And I was going to my son's volleyball game and I thought, well, I'm going to get really hungry at its game. And I'm like, no, the whole time I wished, why didn't I just do a 24-hour fast? I would have been fine. But
Yeah,
that's a
that's
tip
right.
that I
That's
give.
a good
Like,
point too. If you're really not hungry, just do your 24-hour fast. That's
yeah,
a
or
great
just see where it leads you. Yeah. And that's another thing I always tell people. It's like, pick a time if you're doing lunch to lunch or even dinner to dinner. Like I always would pick a time where I had an event to go to that night where like, my kids are very active in athletics. I'm like, if they have a game or whatever, I'm just like, I'll be so zoned into that I won't
thing.
care
But
about it.
your adrenaline will keep you
Yeah.
from.
Yeah. So pick a time when you're really busy. And the first time you do it, you're like, what was kind of like fasting? It's like
Yeah,
doing the 16, 17. It's like, what was I so afraid of?
right.
It's really not that big of a deal.
Well, it might be a little bit of an off topic or segue, but my children are in their 30s. I have two daughters that are in their 30s, and I'm going to be 58 in October. So I don't have to worry about periods anymore.
Yeah.
But I haven't looked into any type of hormone therapy. In my mind, because no one in my family, none of my mother, my aunts, we have a very matriarchal family. No one's ever pursued any, relief. We've never questioned menopause. We just went through it and didn't question it. Wondering if that would be helpful, or because I'm not knowing or aware of any issues, should I, even go there? That's something that's in the back of my mind.
Yeah, that's a big, big topic and a big question, but the vast majority of my listeners are perimenopausal or menopausal. And I'm still like, I'm 47, almost 48, and I still get my period very regularly. And I'm like, it's got to be winding down
Yeah.
pretty soon. But yeah, it's like, I would kind of go off symptoms, but, so I was just listening to a podcast with Cynthia Thurlow, and she had an HRT expert on, like and she just had some really great advice, like just to a lot of times you'll go to a conventional doctor or an allopathic doctor and they'll say it doesn't matter. Your hormones are changing all the time anyway. But she said to like get a baseline of them and just so you have that. But yeah, if you're menopausal, definitely your estrogen's down, your progesterone's down, your testosterone is down. A lot of women get like brain fog and weight loss resistance and all of these things, and insulin resistance compiles, like it just
All of
exacerbates
it.
all of
Mhm.
that. So it's like women have so much going on. And then in perimenopausal and menopausal years, you grow less insulin sensitive as well. So you're just not utilizing insulin and carbohydrates. And so women north of 40 or, late 30s, 40s, they really should start eating differently. And, like what we got away with in our 20s with as far as carbohydrate load, you just can't do that because you're just not as insulin sensitive. So people just think, oh, I'm going to gain weight. I'm going to get unhealthy. It's like, no, it doesn't have to be like that. But I would say, yeah, there's no reason why you shouldn't go and try bioidentical hormones and HRT especially if you're having symptoms. So you've resolved a lot of things just by reversing or starting to reverse,
Mhm.
I suspect you had insulin resistance. Well, you did if you have fatty liver. But a lot of those other hormones just start talking better and connecting better, and it's a whole big network. So but I think a lot of women, like our mothers especially, like they totally shied away from any sort of HRT because of the studies that were done that really weren't good studies. But I look at my own mom like, oh, she could have, like, she's got so much brain fog and, abdominal obesity, and that's from a lack of estrogen and not sleeping well. Like a lot of that could have been avoided. So yeah, I mean, and I always tell people like conquer one thing at a time, like get this all, embrace this lifestyle and see where you're at. But if you start to like notice your sleep quality is diminishing, or you can't, now you're having some weight loss resistance, it's definitely worth getting the at least a baseline of the female sex hormones done, and then just going from there. But I think it's criminal that so many women, especially like our age and a little bit older, have been told not to use HRT
Oh,
and have
yes.
just suffered so many symptoms that they didn't need to suffer from. So, but yeah, I have a lot of great podcast episodes with hormone specialists, and those can be very, very helpful.
Well, I also knew that I was going to be pre-diabetic or was because I, did check my blood insulin occasionally because, my mother and other people in my life were type 2 diabetics. So there was a time that it was definitely eking up well over 100 in the mornings. And so I still check it occasionally now. And most of the time it's, 90s. Um, really probably doesn't go out of the 90s though. So I think that, and occasionally it's 100 and I'm like, what's going on? I'm not eating anything that could have triggered this and I'm doing everything. So I think there's still some insulin, insensitivity issues there that I know that, I really want to stay on track and continue to look at that. And, maybe would the hormone therapy help that as well?
It definitely could. And then just looking at, like, I always encourage people to wear a continuous glucose monitor so you can see like the baseline blood sugars are bumped up when you're stressed out, when you have a poor night's sleep. But it all just kind of interplays with each other, because if you're not sleeping well, then your hormones are off. And
Right.
and then your sex hormones are diminishing and you can't sleep well. And it's just, can be this big catch 22. So yeah, it's a lot easier in that respect to just be a man and never have to worry about the hormones fluctuating. And then another thing to think about is when you go through menopause, the adrenal glands pick up the work of the ovaries. Now, the ovaries just kind of say, see ya, served my time, I'm done, I'm checking out. And the adrenal glands have to pick up that work. So if you're super stressed out, not sleeping well, there's just so many things that go on in this time of our lives. So you also have to think about adrenal health and just getting a good handle on all of the hormones at play. So,
Yeah.
yeah, totally interesting. So I know you switched jobs too. Like, tell us about like I know so when you come on the podcast, you have to kind of give me a little information about you. And you said you had started 2 new businesses. Has
Yeah.
that been like just after you started fasting, or how has that, it's like, I feel like fasting changes so many things for so many people. It's like physically, yes, your body composition, your fatty liver, I mean, your cholesterol, so many improvements, but how has it made a difference for you mentally? And, just being able to say, all right, this job is burning me out. I don't like the person that I am. I'm quitting and I'm starting some businesses. Tell us about how that all occurred.
Well, probably my stress and, me getting to the point of, saying enough is enough. I've got to try something different. Um, was one of the things that came to the head was my career. And I quit a job, just outright quit a job, gave them the notice they asked for. They asked for 3-4 weeks, and I was okay with that. In October 28th of last year was my last day. And I, knew I could take a little bit of time off, and I just, was resting, soul searching, all of that sort of thing. And had been talking to some colleagues I've worked with in the past about doing our own thing in our industry, which is staffing. And we looked into it, we talked about it, we researched it. I interviewed for some other jobs. I was like, out of the frying pan, into the fire. It solves so many issues. You get paid all this money, in 2 weeks, you just have this paycheck again. You have a 401k, you have all these things. But I'm very entrepreneurial in nature, and I always have all these ideas and things I want to try. And I just decided to pull the trigger. And that was April 6th of this year. And I said to myself, okay, you've got to get focused, and you've got to pull in all the resources you can to get focused and stay focused, because I want this to be successful. So that's my staffing business, and it's going great. We all work very hard, but we get to work smart, and we get to do it the way we want to do. And it's fun. And I went on vacation a few weeks ago to Aruba, where, it's not easy to work when you're in a foreign country. And for the first time, I took a vacation and was really able to enjoy it and disconnect because of the business partners that I have and who I've chosen to work with. So that's going well. No stress there, except, we have to make money and make clients happy. And then I had bought a home in Texas 2 years ago. And with the goal of having a place to go to, I used to be a resident of Virginia, to have my family gatherings and the holidays and things like that. So because I'm here half the time, I decided in January to look into Airbnb and short-term rentals, and, as a real estate investment, try that out. And that's gone really, really well. It's just been wonderful. And now, I'd like to expand that business because I really enjoy it. And it's been, just a lot of fun. And it suits me well because I like to take care of people. I like to, decorate. I like to make sure people have everything they need. So it takes that nurturing side of me, since my daughters are independent in their 30s and don't need me there right with them as much as they used to. So it's all working out. The intermittent fasting and just focusing on my health has actually given me time to focus on my emotional and spiritual health more. So thinking about stress, thinking about, meditating, thinking about, I stretch, and that's kind of my meditation. I put on meditating music, I turn the lights off, I sit in my room by myself and I stretch. All of those things, the stress is just so much easier to handle. And there are still stressful things. I have my, a very close aunt right now is in hospice. I have my daughter's ups and downs. They're interviewing for jobs. They don't get the second interview. There's all kinds of things that are stressful every day. My fiance has COVID, whatever it may be. but it's just all so much easier to handle when you feel like you're in control of this one aspect of your life finally. And you just, like I think I said in my notes that I wrote to you, I'm just not afraid. Like you used to be afraid, I'm going to gain this weight back, or I'm never going to lose this weight, or my health's going to go out of control. And it's just really nice to not be afraid.
Yeah, that's perfect. I love that. Yeah, it's one thing to know you can lose weight, but it's a whole nother thing to know you can sustain the weight loss and feel good, not feel deprived, not feel like you're starving, not feel like you said, like you're just gonna fail one more thing. So I'm so glad things have worked out, but you've had some really major life transitions in the last 6 months. What would you say your biggest hurdle has been since you've started this lifestyle, and how have you overcome that?
Um, I think the biggest hurdle is staying in some sort of a routine, especially for me because I split my time between the DC, Virginia area and Texas. And I mean, I kind of like it that way. I grew up, my father's industry moved us once a year. So I went to 12 different schools growing up. So I kind of have that wanderlust. Yes, I know most people are shocked at that. But I kind of have that wanderlust that I like to start new and have a different scenery. So it works well for me, but you have to really be dedicated to some sort of routine. And what has worked best for me is starting out with just one or two things that I was trying to work into my routine, and then adding another, and then adding another, and then adding another. And all of those things are you have 5 pillars, is it, that you really talk about? It's all those things ultimately. At the end of the day, it's all those things. And like I said probably in my notes and said a few minutes ago, and I just added strength training again. So it's all those things, just adding a little at a time, getting that down as a routine, and then adding another. And the results, the blood test results, and then on the scale results, and then just the way you feel results are what really motivate you to just keep doing it.
Yeah. Are you just one time zone difference from?
Yes, I'm
Okay.
only an hour, so
Okay.
that helps. It's not too big, of a difference to it. There's really no adjustment.
Yeah, because I was gonna ask if it was more than, 2 hours, 3 hours, like, that is tough to, travel back and forth in between
Yes,
different time zones, and I know I've done a podcast episode on that, and shift work, like, that can really do a lot of a lot of
yes.
people in when when your schedule is changing every single day or week, and yeah, so you just really need to think ahead a little bit, but in closing, what advice would you have for, maybe this is the very first like somebody searched us up and like, oh, I'm just going to listen to this one podcast. Like what's your best advice for somebody just starting out with this lifestyle?
Well, definitely. I mean, I'm just a voracious learner. So I would say seek out information, read a lot of different aspects so that you can make your own decisions. Definitely look up Shana and make sure you're listening to her, or reading, whatever your method of ingesting information is. um, you turned me on to Cynthia Thurlow. So listening to podcasts, you're going to hear somebody who's a guest that you love, and then you're going to start listening to that podcast. So I would say, information, but action is more important. It's really more important to just get out there and do something. And I hear you and other people that I listen to and read say, you may not feel motivated. You can't wait until you feel motivated. Set a goal that at least today I'm going to go to the gym, or at least today I'm going to get out and walk, even if it's only a half a mile. Because, and do it when you really don't, at the time you least feel like doing it. And that will create, motivation, and any success will create, your desire to do more. So that's what I would say. And talk to people that have been successful, who you trust their opinion and their judgment, because that will show you, the proof that it can change your life.
Yeah. Have you had any pushback from family members or friends or people that you work with the, with just adapting who have been negative for you?
Um, People aren't overall negative. I know my daughter had said to me, "Mom, I don't know about that intermittent fasting. That can mess up your hormones." So I don't really, I want to be able to articulate a response to that when I hear it. I wasn't ready when she said that to be, and I'm really careful what I say to my children. I let them kind of figure out things on their own. But now they can see how happy I am, and that's the one thing that they notice. I'm just so happy. So they're more on board and inquisitive about what I'm doing specifically. But I think people still want you to go to happy hour with them and have the salty, fatty foods that are fried and aren't good for you, and the drinks. People still want you to be that person for them who will order the pizza and watch the movie, at 9 o'clock at night. So there's a little bit of that, but overall, I think, when people see the changes, they're just supportive and happy for you. And if anything, it started to, rub off on some of my family members. When I'm with them and I cook, they eat what I cook and it's healthier. And I'll say, no, I don't want to go out to eat. I have food here. I'd rather eat here because, anytime you eat out, you just don't know exactly what you're getting. And, I think it's overall positive.
Yeah, that's great. And I think when you're out with people or they want to quantify what they're doing. So if they're out for happy hour and you're like, oh no, I'm working on improving my health. There's that guilt factor, right? It's like they want to feel good about what they're doing, even though it's not going to probably lead to the consequence that they want to,
Right.
if that makes sense. So I know there is going through some of that. And I know for me personally, I've actually had to, like stop spending time with certain people just because of that. I'm just not that person anymore. And that can be hard to do. I mean, it's socially challenging for sure. And we just live in a culture that, embraces all, all of the unhealthy foods and drinks and what we're doing and our habits. So it's not easy to overcome. So I give you credit for sticking with it and making so much progress, but you're on the other side now. It's like, what makes you feel good and what routine makes you feel good. And, my advice to people is always like, if it's not broken, don't fix it. Like if what you're currently doing is working for you and you're reversing disease, it's like, ride it out as long
Yep. Keep
as
doing
long
what you're
yeah,
doing.
yes. And I love that you mentioned how it's rubbing off on other people because it really does. And that always makes me so happy knowing that like it just clicks with people like, oh my gosh, like this is why I've struggled for so long. And when you get to that point where it clicks and then you can teach your offspring, so, and then they know it's like whether or not they practice whatever it is that you teach them is their prerogative, but at least they know. And I always say that with my kids. It's like, okay, yeah, they're making some choices that I don't love, but they know, like they have the knowledge, whether or not they choose to carry out my suggestions, recommendations, teachings, whatever, that's their choice, but at least they know. And then they can teach their kids too. So it's just like this generational thing that is a big snowball. So I thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story with us, Bonnie. And maybe at some point we'll have you back because you're just getting started, girl.
Yes, I'm just getting started. And I will say many times in my life when I've told someone something that was going well in my life, I said, well, check back with me, I'm kind of a self-deprecating person, well, I just started, but I'm telling you, I don't have that feeling this time. I mean,
That's
I just know
amazing.
just
That's
gonna get
amazing.
better.
It is. It's just different. Like you said, you have the confidence that you can carry out with it. It's sustainable and you don't have to go back to being sick and not feeling well. So thanks so much for sharing your story.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me and thank you for everything you do.
Um,
Are you still there?
I am.